Hello, everyone. Welcome to What You Gotta Say. I'm Vincent Squire. For those of you who are following us on Facebook, YouTube, Roku, and now Comcast Channel 190 Extra, I want to welcome you. Now, you'll see scrolling below on the bottom is the phone number. This is a live show, and you can call in. And it's Mental Health Monday, and we got the right doctor for you. Dr. Gene Wright will be with us, and we're coming back in just 2 minutes. 2 seconds. Excellent. And welcome back to What You Gotta Say. I'm Vincent Squire, and my co host today is a man who wears many hats and a great deal of accolades. He is probably one of the most busy or hardest working men in the humanities field. With me today is none other than the Wright Doctor, Dr. Gene Wright. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Vince. Always a pleasure to be with you.
How was your Easter?
It was great. I got a chance to get some rest. Got a chance to talk to a few friends here and there, and actually got out and about. It was a decent day, even though it got a little chilly later. But yeah, I was able to enjoy the good nature that was out, so it was good.
Okay, so let's dive into it. Let's see. A guy decides to run over his ex in a car.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Another guy decides to shoot in Miami. A guy shoots the boyfriend of his ex girlfriend. Another guy in Texas decides to hold his ex girlfriend hostage. And then we have another shooting involved with another related to another ex girlfriend offense. Uh, what the hell is going on with relationships? Is it
Yeah.
is it the COVID? Is it the stress? Is doctor help me out here?
Well, Vince, I think we blame COVID for enough things, um, and
No,
it
I
certainly
blame
is some truth
Trump.
to it.
I don't blame COVID. I blame Trump.
Well, he didn't invent COVID, but he certainly didn't help us get through it.
Yeah.
What I would say is this, that relationships are challenging at best. And there were relationship issues even before the pandemic. So, is it possible that the isolation and the depression, anxiety that came as a result of being isolated and not being able to move about freely, could that have exacerbated what was already there? Yeah, I think so. When you look at the data, it shows that domestic violence increased during the last 2 years. It shows that substance use and abuse increased during the last 2 years. That's a volatile cocktail: anger, substance abuse, and a bad relationship. So yeah, I think there's some truth to some of that. And I also would like to point out that there are some common denominators in the stories you just shared. Can you think about what they are? I'm sure your audience can. You gave four stories and there were some common denominators.
The X factor.
That, and that it seems to be predominantly men or males that are,
But hold on, doctor.
yeah,
Also
yeah.
in the increase during the 18 and a half months of isolation and COVID,
Mm.
there was also an increase in condom sales.
Well, both things can be true at the same time. And so, what I mean by that is not any one data point is going to give us the catch all phrase or the answer to everything. What we can say is that human relationships are complex. Certainly not a no, no one is going to dispute that. However, when you add in the different elements that you brought up and the ones that we're going to talk about today in terms of Mental Health Monday and the challenges of trying to navigate, um, trying to navigate.
Sorry.
Yeah. So trying to navigate what's going on with people. It's hard to do that when you don't even know where you're coming from yourself. And so the stories that you gave certainly are on the far end of what's going on. Clearly, most people are not beating up their ex, running over them with cars, shooting them. So sometimes those headlines give us a false impression that this is what the majority of people are doing, when that is not the case. But we do have to acknowledge that there is a lot of stress, a lot of trauma, and a lot of knee jerk reactions to people's difficulty dealing with these interpersonal issues and broken relationships.
But doctor, I mean, okay, now I don't know where you are, but we have now gone into a situation where no mask, mask, no mask, mask, and now back to mask. In Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, because in the tri-state area, the trends tend to follow each other. Now, that period of isolation, is that the incubator of all of this anxiety, stress, depression, domestic abuse? Also that went up incredibly was alcohol consumption.
Yeah, I think incubator is a good term. And again, you could probably see that I'm not trying to lay any one variable or factor as the end all be all cause. And so it is that combination of things you mentioned. I mean, Vince, think about it. People were already struggling financially before the pandemic. People were already having trouble with relationships before the pandemic. Um, Young people were trying to find themselves and matriculate through academia or classes, high school, whatever level they're in, and deal with puberty and the changes, and deal with social isolation that started to creep up. Also, you have to look at not every jurisdiction, community, state were doing the same thing. I mean, it really is confusing to people. You mentioned mask on, mask off, and all that. Depending on where you are in the time of day, man, the rules change. And that is frustrating to people and challenging for people. So, yeah, I agree with you that in the area that we're in, the tri state area, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, it's very challenging. But you could also go further east in New York and those areas and what the rules were. You can go south, you can go Midwest, you can go west, man. And every single state, every jurisdiction seems to be making it up as they go.
Well, okay. Full disclosure.
Mhm.
During the start of COVID, I had an issue with my child who, I mean, I really, looking back, I feel sorry for her generation, the class of 2020. She basically, there were threats of not being able to have their graduation They had their graduation through a very sparse outdoor praying that it didn't rain ceremony.
Right.
From that point, her transition into womanhood and adulthood and going to college, it was full throttle. You're going through this, even wearing a mask, having her get both of her shots and having a test just to get on campus. Um, and dealing with her level of uncertainty, it caused me to react
Yeah.
very me like. You know, don't get me wrong. I'm a hands-on dad, and when my children act up, I'm gonna put my hands on
Mm.
them. but I mean, it was never to. I mean, even though that was outside of the scope of how we actually communicate and problem solve, it was
Yeah.
still outside of the scope of me. So is the rest of America feeling that same level of anxiety or insecurity, or even what am I looking for? What I'm looking for? Um, Uncertainty.
Well, certainly, what you say is it's challenging. First of all, I should full disclosure. I am a mandatory reporter, so uh, be careful how much you share about your hands.
Oh no, I'm all right with that. I'm good.
Okay, all right.
No,
But
no,
all kidding
I'm like
aside,
Shahrazad Ali, give him open hands, slapping. No.
okay. Well, this is your show, so hey, I'm just a guest. So what I would say is the uncertainty. I like that word, Vince. I'm glad you used that word because it encompasses so much of what people are feeling. So I think it's easier to describe it that way than for you or I or anyone to speak for all of America. I think what we can say is in pockets across the country, not that we can rely solely on the news because we understand that, people feed us what they want us to know and they keep back what they don't want us to know. So as much as news can be helpful, I think it is certain that people are struggling and they're struggling at all levels. Let's start with the young people you mentioned. I participated in drive-by graduations. I participated in drive-by birthdays. And so the human spirit is so resilient, man. People figured out a way to do the best they could for their kids. I was in my neighborhood and long lines of cars with balloons on them, with the windows rolled down, honking their horn, saying "Happy Birthday" or "Congratulations" or class of 2020, all that stuff. People did what they could, man. And it was refreshing to see. At the same time, there were folks who may not have had that support, who didn't have that neighborhood or neighbor or family member who put that kind of thing together. And so they stayed isolated, still isolated. One other thing, many schools were not on the same level, depending on where you went to school, private school, public school, charter school. You may not have had the same level of instruction. And so for some kids, think about this, Vince. For some kids, they haven't been educated for 2 years, and yet they're getting passed because, people say, well, it's not their fault, COVID, this and that. Every school was not equipped to teach virtually. Every school did not have the requisite teachers with the skill set. Some schools didn't have any teachers at all, and folks were not available to teach. So when you add all that up, Vince, that uncertainty you talk about is real. If you go up to the next level, man, all this stuff. I mean, we're just talking about kids, but we can come back and talk about everybody. We can talk about parents like you, and then eventually we should probably talk about seniors.
So, okay, now here is one thing that I gave a great deal of consideration to. We're
Mhm.
talking about roughly 2 years where children were slightly, if anything, educated and they
Right.
got a pass. They made it to the next grade, no matter what. So we're looking at maybe 15 years we're going to be governed by a group of dumbasses. I mean, that have just totally who will run our world right now because of the situation. But don't answer that because we're going
Okay.
to take a break. I've got the right doctor, Dr. Gene Wright, and this is Mental Health Monday. We'll be right back in 2 minutes, 2 seconds. Yeah, so doctor, people who are okay, welcome back. I'm Vincent Squire. This is What You Gotta Say. Mental Health Monday with Dr. H. Gene Wright II. So my last comment, okay. So those kids, are they gonna pick this, the missing 2 years of high school up in college?
Well, I will say this. I would disagree with your last statement.
What, the
And
dumbass part? Come on.
yeah, that last
Okay.
one. I'm going to say that there's some challenges, no question about it. However, what we have also learned about this generation is that they are a generation of people who want to help others.
Mhm.
So I look at the strengths, not just the disparities or the barriers or the challenges. And those challenges are opportunities for real. So when I think about the disparity in access to the educational system, depending on where you were during the pandemic, that's real. And so, no, they're not going to be the makeup for 2 years. That we just like that's like trying to make up for sleepy loss because you was out partying all night. Sleeping 24 hours the next day doesn't give you back the time you missed.
Been
So
there, done that, doctor. Yeah, it don't work.
I'm just trying to mention something that people may have related to. But what you can do is prepare yourself to understand what you missed. So, what do people do? You have access to remedial service, you have access to support service, you have access to a lot of different things. And again, there's disparities because everybody doesn't have access to the same resource. And so some communities are going to be crippled by this, where other communities can, kind of move up and move on. And so, yes, I agree with you. I feel sorry for our young people that went through some of those things. But the key is to, as a community, everybody doesn't have the same parents, everybody doesn't have the same resources, but as a community, we can wrap our arms around those young people and kind of gird them up for what they didn't have, or because everybody doesn't have an equal situation. You've heard me say it before, Vince. The pandemic was a storm, and we were not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, but we're in different boats. And what that really means is what you just described and what I'm commenting on, which is that, man, depending on where you were, what you had, and how you were able to utilize what you had, that makes the difference as to what the next 2 years. You said 15. I'm not even going to go that far, Vince. I'm going to say the next 2 years. We need to start counting time in smaller increments because of the challenges that we've had.
Mm. Okay, let me paint this picture with a broad brush.
Okay.
The challenges that we had during COVID, and this is how I see it. COVID didn't bring on the issues. COVID exposed the issues that we were already dealing with.
Agreed.
People of color, black, brown, light, dark, have had issues. Food insecurity, medical treatment insecurities, financial insecurities, housing insecurities, uh, wow, wage worth insecurities. COVID didn't bring that on. COVID exploited it. We've had racial insecurities. We've had trust issues with our authorities, the police, the mayor, the judges. We've had issues where, things have been swept under the rug, and now we are at a situation where COVID has exposed it, and we've got the woke generation. Now that everybody's woke, why is all this violence increasing?
Well, I don't think woke and violence have anything to do with it. I think we've already touched on the challenges of unresolved trauma, which you just
Mhm.
mentioned, many aspects, all the things that you just named. We could head it under one heading, which is called poverty, okay, which is a major social determinant of health. You mentioned housing, all those things fall under that umbrella of poverty. All those challenges you mentioned, disparity in access to healthcare falls under poverty. Lack of wage or livable wage or unemployment falls under poverty. And so policy needs to address the major issue, which is the poverty. We don't have policies that adequately address the major issue. The major issue of poverty undermines all the other things that would normally be resourceful. Communities have lost their efficacy. what I mean by that is communities of color used to be able to maintain and sustain and make it through,
We
even though
we,
they,
we
they
came
had some
together.
challenges. Yeah.
we,
Well, now those
we had
so,
rent parties. We
yeah.
supported, whatever effort, whatever they were selling, whatever they were doing
Yeah.
for income. We came together, but we were all sitting up here like, I can't come together for you because I'm sitting up here dealing with my own.
Well, that's why I think, and I think it was a misnomer for people to talk about social distancing as the thing that we needed to do during COVID. I would like to just tweak that just a little bit, and I've been doing that as when I go around doing my workshops and presentations. I've encouraged people to remain social, but it's the physical distancing that we really needed to do during COVID. And they
Right,
kept saying social distance, social distance, social distance. And it really irked me, Vince, because no, we need to remain social. Human beings are interdependent. We need each
right,
other.
right.
If we're not able to touch, we have to still be on the phone. We have to be on this Zoom like you and I are. We know. And so that's what I encourage people during the pandemic. Call your mother, call an elderly person, call your grandmother, have a conversation. Pick up the phone and talk to some old college roommates that you haven't talked to in a while. Don't be isolated from people when you have technology and mechanisms to connect. Physical distance was mandatory and it was helpful, right? Because we had a lot of folks who didn't want to get vaccinated. So if you can't get vaccinated, guess what? We can't be all up in each other's face. All right. So we made some hard choices. I don't have a comment or opinion on whether you should get vaccinated or not. Everybody has their own personal choice. But if you're not going to do it, then you certainly owe it to the rest of us to make sure that you don't expose me to whatever it is you carrying around.
Thank
So
you.
in my mind, we gave people the wrong impression about social distancing, and that isolated a lot of people. Where we should have emphasized the safety of wearing your mask, being 6 feet apart, being 20 some feet apart, not having huge barbecues and block parties, unless you're going to be safe, all those things, right? But that doesn't mean you can't be social, right? It
Right.
means we have to, and then I'm going to move real quickly to the elderly, the seniors. The seniors and the young people, seems to me, Vince, got the worst end of this deal. These
Mm,
18 months you're talking about, I'm going to stretch it. I'm going to say 24 months, Vince, because it was 24 months as of March 18th of
18th.
this
Right,
year.
right,
So,
right.
but you're right. The crux of it, the painful part was that 18 months, that first 18 months. But think about it. We talked about your daughter and even younger people in high school, like my son, who missed out on so much. But what about the seniors, man? What did they miss out on? People who are normally living alone anyway, or living in senior facilities where, yeah, they may have relationships with their
They were
peers,
the
but think
hardest
about what
hit.
they were going through. Yeah, man. Yeah. So when you think about all that, Vince, and keeping with the theme of Mental Health Monday, one of the things that some of the faith communities did was to put together small groups of people to go out and visit, not get in, not up against each other physically, but visit those places. Man, I actually participated in some of those events, and it was a lot of fun. We went to senior citizens facilities, and we sang. We couldn't bring food or anything like that, but we could bring gift cards. We could bring water, right? Because you bring water, but you couldn't bring anything that could potentially be a problem. And man, I'm
Mm.
gonna tell you, not only were the seniors happy, the staff, the staff were glad to see us because they even had, other than coming back and forth to work, they didn't have any outlets. So I'm saying all that to say there's a lot of ways to deal with mental health and to encourage and when I talk about mental health, I'm talking about what we all want. We all want mental health. We all want good mental health. The issue that we're talking about is you don't want mental illness, right? But even with mental illness, there are cures, there's support, there are resources. And during this pandemic, you're right, Vince, things were exposed. Character or lack thereof was exposed. Violence. Again, I don't have the end all be all to solve violence. What I can tell you is human beings that have a mindset to conquer others, we call that colonizers. Yeah, when you have a mindset of conquering others, kind of like what's going on right now in the Ukraine, when you have a mindset of conquering others and taking from others what you want, as opposed to an attitude of sharing and helping each other out, or that community, when you did this, you talked about the community. I tell you, man, a lot of that is what's fallen apart, and that's what has destroyed community efficacy because people are afraid to be out and about to help each other because they're afraid of getting hit by a stray bullet. They're afraid of getting, robbed. Think about the carjackings that have gone on just in our area, Vince. So when you put all that together, yeah, man, the last 18 months have been devastating, but not just to the young people. They've been devastating to everybody. And let's not forget the seniors.
Mm. Well, there is another group that has truly been devastated. Um, the church, universal.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're looking at the diversity of, or the polarization of one, very highly publicized and documented election, followed by a very public display of mistrust with our government, followed by, the attack on the Capitol, very devastating. And every Sunday, those brave men and women got up there at their pulpit, some in their church and some virtually, got up there and preached us through 24 months of hell. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, we talk about we talk about the heroes of the pandemic, the first responders, and we give them a great deal of praise. We talk about those people who they called essential workers, who risk having COVID to make sure that the shelves were stocked at Walmart.
Mhm.
We never gave that much credit to our members of the clergy who held their congregations, held their communities, held their world together during and experiencing the same things that we have. I mean,
Yeah.
you talk to a lot of pastors. I talk to a lot of pastors. They're burnt out.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, one of the things that I've done in the last 2 years, I mean, I was doing it before the pandemic, Vince, but really kind of stepped it up and was more intentional about it because of the relationship that I have with faith leaders in the community. And I agree with you 100%. I actually put together a presentation that talked about the impact of trauma in the faith community. Actually, just delivered one of those 2 weeks ago. Not quite, it was April 9th. So a couple Saturdays ago, I did a presentation in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on that very topic. I keep a small private practice, just clergy as my clients, because of all the things that you're sharing. And one of the things that I talked about in my presentation, and I also included educators and teachers and administrators, Vince, when I gave the description of first responders, I included with firefighters, EMS, EMT, and the law enforcement. I included pastors, or what I call faith leaders, and I also included educators and teachers. But I also mentioned the truck drivers that we don't often give them credit. And you're right, man. We don't have any food if they don't drive the trucks during the pandemic.
There you go.
The people that are coming into the grocery stores and stocking the shelves. You're right. And so we need to expand that list of first responders, because the first responder, and I looked at it like this: people who normally run from danger, these folks run to danger.
Right.
Right. So you got your hospital workers, obviously, and we could go on and on. It's a longer list than law enforcement, firefighters, and EMS. And that's the one thing I wanted the clergy that I was talking to at the time, and the educators, teachers, and administrators that help with our schools. I wanted them to know not only are you appreciated, but you also have to take care of yourself. So the second half of that presentation, I did 2 days. The second day, I talked about self-care. And that fits in nicely with Mental Health Mondays, because one of the things that we encourage people to do every Monday, Vince, is to take better care of themselves. When I say better, I don't mean to run from the challenges that we're experiencing. No, they're there, they're real, and there's not a magic bullet or a magic pill for a lot of this stuff. But the one thing you can do is take better care of yourself, knowing what you know. Eat how you eat, drinking plenty of water. Stuff we know, Vince, that we don't always practice, but we know it. I'm not telling people stuff they don't know. Exercise. A lot of people, well, you can't go to the gym and this and that. I'm afraid to go to the gym. All these people, I don't know who's vaccinated. You don't have to go to the gym. Get outside your door and walk. Walking is one of the best things you can do, especially for people our age. I'll throw you in with me. It's a great thing to do. Right?
What you trying to say, doctor?
I'm trying to say You in the same neighborhood, boy. You in the same neighborhood, Ben. And so
That's
when
my
I talk
story.
about
I'm sticking to it. Okay.
that's right. But when you talk about what can be healing for us, again, sometimes we're waiting for something bigger and larger than is necessary. We forget the simple things, man. We forget what's that in your hand. What can you do? Where can you go? What do you have? That's the thing that people have forgotten because they are so used to just everything kind of being, we're Americans, man. We're used to things being easy. And here's the thing. When you had to rethink how you move about in your community, people got discouraged, people got upset. I get it. But at some point, that has to level off. And you have to come up with it. Okay, this is a fact. This thing is real. Now, what do I need to do for me and my family to make sure that we're in the best situation we can be? And then once you get that squared away, don't stop there. What can I do to help my neighbor? What can I do to help my community? And I think that's where the faith community struggled, Vince, is there again, like many other things we're talking about today, there was a large variety of responses. Everybody didn't respond the same way. Every faith community didn't respond the same way. Just like every family, every person, every individual did not respond the same way. But we have another crack at it. We're not out of the woods yet. You know, Philadelphia was the first major city, I believe, that reinstated the mask mandate for indoors. So clearly there's been an uptick. So we're not out of the woods. So let's take the learning that we've had the last 2 years and now let's apply it now.
Well,
Now it's not a surprise.
well, Philadelphia responded by reinstating the mask mandate. New Jersey responded by legalizing marijuana.
Okay.
So we'll be right back. Mental Health Monday with the right doctor, Dr. H. Gene Wright II. We'll see you now in 2 minutes, 2 seconds. Go ahead, doctor.
Yes, sir. So I love how you ended that last segment with the comparison of what Pennsylvania did with the mask mandate. It's reinstated for indoors. In New Jersey, mandating, did they mandate it or did they just suggest it for
No,
marijuana?
it's a law now. I mean, there are like cannabis dispensers. I mean,
Oh my
look, there's a
goodness.
line of, of people now buying legal marijuana just to get
Well, the
through this COVID experience.
Well, there's always a silver lining to everything. And for that one, I would say there are some other business persons who are probably not as happy about the line. Because if you're having legal sales, that means somebody else is losing some sales.
Oh, you mean
So
you mean the little guy standing on a corner who's tired of getting arrested?
yeah, maybe that guy.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah,
I'm thinking
yeah.
of I'm thinking of his bosses, not so much that guy on the corner.
Oh,
The
okay.
suppliers. Yeah, I'm thinking of the suppliers. But it's interesting you mentioned that because sometimes human beings self-medicate for reasons that you've indicated. Other times, what people don't realize is that addiction is serious. And so when you put together what's happened the last couple of years, and you've heard me already say that substance abuse and use and dependence increase. You mentioned alcohol sales increase. All of that is true. And the challenge for our society, especially when we come from a society that says, this pill will fix anything, this drink will take care of all your needs. You know, we have
We're
a
looking for the
microwave
silver bullet.
mindset. Yeah, man, we have a microwave mindset, man. We think everything, you just push a button and it's going to be done in 30 seconds. And so people get disappointed. And we're teaching our young people the wrong lessons in terms of work ethic and what it takes to really make it through some difficult times. And so when people don't have the resiliency already established in their system, they could develop it, but they need mentors, they need leadership, they need parents, they need grandparents, they need any adult figure that can help a young person see that you are not the worst thing you ever did. And these things pass. But if you don't have that background, man, it can feel hopeless to some people who don't have that background.
True. So, all right. Now, here's the thing that I've learned during COVID.
Okay.
While everybody was going through the process of social distancing, I
Hmm.
should have learned to social distance myself from the refrigerator. Yet,
Okay.
while, but it was that time frame of isolation where it was just me and my family, me, my wife,
Right.
my daughter.
Right.
And this was one of those situations where we girded ourselves together.
Mm.
I mean, we grew together. COVID did expose some things in our personalities that we truly have overlooked.
Hmm.
And in that exposure, we worked on it together. I mean, I have, okay, I'm going to lose some, man credits for
True
this.
confession. True
Uh,
confession. Go ahead. Go ahead.
true confession. During this period of isolation and COVID, I have never loved my wife more.
Mm.
I mean, through the isolation and getting to know each other and huddling up together and watching, Ozark and binging on everything else on, streaming
Mm.
television through us going through the uncertainties and
Yes.
figuring out and navigating our way to being healthy and safe
Mhm.
through the situation of, okay, are things going to shut down, and understanding how I have her back as well as she has mine, to the
Mhm.
point where we said, hey, look, if the store shut down, we can eat, dried beans for, 3 or 4 weeks. The whole situation has brought us stronger.
Yes.
Yet I am vexed by seeing
Mhm.
guys who have gone through this and are now completely upset and now turn to killing their spouses, or wives or girlfriends, running them over with cars, shooting them. Women are leaving their men because of this or being exploited by this. I mean, I don't get it, doctor. Help me out.
Well, I mean, you're asking for an explanation for a multiple group of problems that are unfortunately part of the human DNA. We have been destruction and destructive and self-destructive for a long period of time. This is not a 2-year thing, Vince. This didn't just crop up because of a pandemic, an invisible a disease. You know, and that's what I mean. We like to lay so much blame on something, and that's what we do as human beings. We point outward all the time, pointing outward, and
We
that's what
point the
happens
blame
in
on something
relationships
else
or someone else,
or
which is
someone
why
else.
you have the relationship issues. It's we don't make a lot of I statements. You know, selfish people tend to say you, and when you say you, you're pointing outwards as opposed to looking introspectively, looking in the mirror, as the old folks used to say, and seeing. And so you gave a good example of how you and your wife tried to do that. You looked in the mirror and then you saw some things that were, oh, okay, this is some stuff we need to work on. You worked on it together. You didn't criticize each other. You worked on it together. Having a healthy relationship is having a partner who can be honest with you, but still kind, right? You can disagree, but you don't have to be disagreeable, right? That's
There
the
you
loss
go.
of humanity that people have, that we've witnessed. And so I understand why you're vexed, but I would encourage you not to let the behaviors around the world, including those in your backyard, not too far from you, get you to the point where you feel like that's all of humanity. It is not. I have so many examples, both personal and by watching the news and not just looking at the bad news, right? Where people came together. Maybe not in the same way as 9/11 back, 20 some years ago, um, like we did then in 2001, with the whole destruction of our capital or the attempt to destroy our capitalist system. But they certainly destroyed some buildings and lots of people's lives. But the New York came together, surrounding cities came together, all over the United States. People came together because we had a collective hurt, a collective pain that had happened to us, a collective attack. We were all feeling that way. In the Black community, we had the same response to the killing of George Floyd, right? Right. It wasn't my son, but it sure felt like it. It wasn't my father, but it sure looked like it. It
It
wasn't
sure felt
me.
like me.
Yeah, but it felt like me on the ground. So there
Right.
are ways, there are ways to connect, and there are ways to return to our humanity. And example, and I know we're going to talk about this as we close, but some of the things that we can do to remind ourselves of how much we need each other, that interpersonal thing that we need each other, the relationships that make us stronger. It's not just your family. Yes, that's the place to start, obviously, but you can't just selfishly start and end with your own family. What we've learned during these last 18 to 24 months, Ben, is somebody has to step up for the community. Somebody has to step up for those young people who may not have, the parents that you and I had, or that the parent that you are. Somebody has to step up for those seniors, and somebody has to step up for all those in between who are suffering. Not that you're not suffering, not that you don't have needs, but you've been blessed. And if you've been blessed to the point where you're able to focus on your family and get those things together, do you have a little room left in your heart for somebody else? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
And someone has to step up to have
Yes,
those uncomfortable conversations
yes, yes.
because in the uncomforted and the uncomfortability of those conversations, we get to unpack all of the emotions that we have buried deep and we have pushed aside, and we said that we'll address this later. And what we find out is the more that we bury it, the more that we hide from it, the more that we run from it, the more it turns out into something very negative. It turns out into huge domestic violence. It turns out into huge amounts of anger and rage. It turns out into huge societal abnormalities that are becoming now normal.
Yeah. Well, I think the challenge with the word normal is that it's like a moving it's like a
Yeah.
moving goalpost, right? You can't kick it through the uprights if they keep moving it. And so
Yeah,
that word normal is relative to who's
Be-
using
because
it.
we're now trying to find a new norm.
Yeah, there's no such thing.
Right, right.
Yeah, because human beings want to be comfortable. They want to be complacent. They want to be able to go through their day like robots and automatons, not having to think or process or feel.
Mhm.
That's what unresolved stress and unresolved trauma does to you. You just want to put it on automatic and keep it moving. But that's not life. That's not reality. That's not being a human. Humans cry, humans laugh, humans hurt, humans love, humans feel. And so that wishing and hoping for the day when I can just put it on autopilot and keep it moving. No, that's never going to happen. So we should stop wishing for what people are calling the good old days, which weren't that good. And we should stop looking into the
Hmm.
future, hoping and praying for some new normal. I use air quotes because that's not possible. The
Right.
only thing we have is today. And it sounds cliche, I know it does, but you can't live in yesterday. What happened happened. Take your lessons from it, keep it moving. You have no control over tomorrow, Vince. So why stress and have anxiety about something out of your control? The only thing you have is today. So start with yourself, start with your family, and let that, yeah, pebble in the pond, as it were. You drop that pebble in the pond and watch it. Yeah, and then let's do that, man, because um, the new normal, that term is depends on who's using it, what normal is.
Mm. So, do we mourn yesterday? Do we mourn the things that we secretly hid in the closet and pushed under the rug? Do we mourn the normality of ignoring all of the things that COVID has exposed? Do we mourn this vast amount of racism and in your face injustice? Do we mourn the fact that we are being underpaid and underappreciated? Do we mourn the simple matter that a black life doesn't matter a hill of beans to a white cop? Do we mourn the simple fact that all we have is each other and we're not even appreciating that? Do we mourn that to move forward, doctor?
Well, I can't tell you what to mourn. What I can say is that lament, which is a form of mourning, is actually healthy. And so when I talked about human beings cry, human beings laugh, um, that is the full extent of what humans are from the top to the bottom. If you think about Jim Valvano, I don't know if your listeners and he gave a great speech when he was he was fighting cancer, and he gave a great speech at the ESPYS, and he talked about a full day of laughing, crying, and loving and all those things. And he said, "Man,
The
that's a
whole
full
human
day."
experience.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And that brother, he came from his Italian roots, and he talked about what it felt like to love, laugh, and cry and all those things. And he said, "Man, that's a great day. If you can do that in one day, that's a beautiful day." Think about that man's perspective, knowing he's going to die, and yet he had the energy, the courage, the perspective to share a glimpse of hope to listeners and people across the world. The ESPN stage is a huge stage, right?
Very.
And then when this man finished his speech, his two friends went up on the stage and escorted him because he could not walk, escorted him back to his chair. So what I'm saying is
If I
that's an
recall that
example.
right, there wasn't a dry eye in the whole audience. I mean,
No, I was the only one that wasn't crying, and that's because I wasn't in the audience. I was home. I was crying to my TV.
no, there
Yes,
were
there was,
people on TV who were actually wiping their eyes and crying. I mean, there was not,
yes,
I have not seen a
but it
larger
wasn't
display of courage and
right.
bravery.
But here's the thing, Vince. They weren't crying because they were sad. They were crying because they were uplifted. They were
Yes.
crying because somebody poured into them. A dying man poured in his last breaths of life into another human being, and it reached millions, Vince.
Mm.
That man took what little bit he had left. I'm sure he talked to his wife and children. I'm sure they said, "Are you sure this is a good idea? Do you really want to do this? You got to put on a tuxedo. You got to go to New York. You got to get up on that stage. You're barely making it, man."
You're right.
And
Yeah.
that man figured out with the grace of the divine a way to live and survive a few more hours, a few more days, however long it took to give that message to the rest of us. Now I say, are we going to let that go to waste because of a virus? Because that we've had losses, painful losses. People couldn't even bury their dead. But are we going to allow that
You couldn't
to
even
influence?
mourn your dead. I
No,
mean,
because here's the thing, Dan.
funerals are virtual now. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
you just go online. I mean,
I got it, man. But one thing I'll say about, and I love being American, and I know that, it's got its challenges. America has its challenges. But one
mhm.
thing that I will say with the structural racism, with white supremacy, with patriarchy, where men dominate women, and all the things that we know are wrong, not just in this country, but around the world. But let's just stick to this country, since this is where we live and we call this place home. I have never ran into braver men and women when the chips are down than my neighbors. Some I don't know by name because they're in different cities. I still call them neighbors. And so that love ethic that Martin Luther King tried to espouse, that Gandhi tried to espouse, that Dietrich Bonhoeffer tried to espouse during the Hitler era, that love ethic for people who may not be blessed, may not have the resources. Martin Luther King, considering he was a black man in America in the 60s, coming from the parenthood and everything, he was considered privileged in his day.
Right,
I mean, he went to Morehouse, right? This
right,
right. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was privileged in Germany and set that aside to support the Jews who were being exterminated. So there
right.
are people in our history. There are people in your family. There are people in my family. There are people in the families of your listeners and your viewers that have stepped up. It doesn't have to be on the grand scale of a Martin Luther King or a Gandhi. In your neighborhood, in your faith community, in your own home, can you step up and answer the call? That's what Mental Health Mondays are about, Vince.
The
It's
call
people
to
stepping
serve.
up and
Yeah,
stepping up for the call to service and helping those, whether they look like you or not, whether they're the same age as you or not, whether they have the same SES or opportunity as you or not. The key is when there's an opportunity to serve, what you going to do? That's the question. What are you going to do when your
will
name is
you
called?
will you answer the
Will
call?
you answer the call? That's the question.
Mm. And we're going to find out about answering the call. I'm Vincent Squire with my co-host, Mental Health Mondays, the right doctor, Dr. H. Gene Wright II, in just 2 minutes, 2 seconds. Okay, so welcome back to What You Gotta Say. As always, this show always seems to bless me. The biggest blessing that I have is that God has put Dr. Gene Wright II into my life. So, Dr. Gene, tell people where they can find you.
They can find me at drhgene.com. That's HJEAN.com. They can also go to mentalhealthsuccessboost.com, and they can go to my website and either get my book, Find Strength in Your Struggle, or they can go to Amazon and find the book, Find Strength in Your Struggle.
Well, Dr. Gene, it is always a blessing that
Thank
you
you.
grace us with all God has prepared you for. I mean, this moment and the amount of healing that is going through a lot of people, and a lot of people are experienced just on your words alone. Um, I cannot express how many people call me and say how they get comfort from your words and your advice. So, I mean, I thank you so much for that. For those who
Thank
are
you.
listening and our regular subscribers on YouTube, Facebook, Roku, and now Comcast Channel 190 and Comcast HD, Mother Teresa said this: there every day are atrocities that are exposed. There are tyrants who do horrible things to humanity and they're exposed. There are atrocities that people have to deal with on a daily. There are rapes, there are murders, there are incarcerations, there are beatings beyond imagination that people experience every day. But most important, God has blessed us with the ability to overcome those things. In overcoming those things, we give the strength to help someone else who is suffering the same thing and helping them to overcome them. Yes, we are in a system of one, either getting ready for, going through, or overcoming atrocities, be it COVID, be it high school, be it death, be it shootings, be it drive-by, be it domestic violence. We are all experiencing this. And as Dr. Gene said, yeah, we may be in different boats, but we're all in the same storm. So I cannot say that my torment, my experience is greater than yours, but I can say that it's mine. But what helps me get through mine is when someone checks in on me, talks to me, says hello to me. We may be socially distant in terms of physical, but not socially distant in terms of emotional. Reach out to people, say hello to people, call people, especially our seniors, because those are the ones greatest hit. And those are the ones who actually right now hold our greatest knowledge of wisdom, understanding, and stories. My mother said that no one knows you better from cradle to the grave than your family. Let's start there, checking in on our family, checking in on our friends, and checking in on our society. I want to thank all those people who have held us together for 24 months. Our first responders, the police, the scientists, most of all, our pastors, our stewards, our trustees, and those who are holding our church together, our imams, and our rabbis as well. I'm Vincent Squire. If it be God's will, I'll be here with you tomorrow with the three wise ones. On behalf of Dr. H. Gene Wright, my co-host, and my producer Chaz, if God's will, we'll be back tomorrow. Peace and blessings.